Hello, welcome back to a Spiritual Ascension, my own 5-year journey. Um, I would appreciate if you please like, share, and subscribe. If you're just joining this now, please go back to the intro video. I've done many videos on this story. I'm kind of telling my 5-year story in chronological order. So if you kind of come in the middle of this, even though something may resonate with you, um, you'll kind of not understand like where I'm at this point. So I think when we last left off, I think I did a day in a life, right? A day in a life of being in a shelter. So I landed there, I think it was either September 22nd or September 23rd of 2022. And at this point, I had been living with that family member for about almost 2.5 years. And I was able to walk away from that really horrible situation. I didn't really know what to expect. I had never been in that type of situation. It's only things that I saw on TV, the news, TV shows or whatever. I didn't know what to expect being in, but I was just so grateful to be out of that other situation that I didn't even really care at that point. I think the joy of being out of that situation kind of wore off in the first couple of days when it kind of the realization is like, oh my God, I'm like in shelter, you know? The women want to kind of feel you out to see like, what are you going to be like? That probably happens in any type of situation, whether it's a work situation or any other community type of, and we were in a close kind of atmosphere. We had to wear our masks still. My room, again, was a pretty large room and had two bunk beds in it. And my day kind of was one of, I would get up pretty early in the morning, just to avoid the bathroom rush, because there was only two bathrooms for about 22, 24 women, something like that. Um, I would have my coffee. I would go and sit in like the rec room and do my journaling for about 2 hours or so till about 8:39. Some of the women eventually would question me, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you studying? Like that. And they would ask me questions, or if they were having some kind of issue or something like that, they would come to me and just kind of talk things out. And I've had women that, came and kind of cried to me. So thinking back to when that, if you've been watching my videos, there was a gentleman, another psychic who had come to me and had said that you're going to be doing work with homeless women. I had no idea what that meant, and that was about 4 or 5 years beforehand, and it came to be so. Um, so I guess I became kind of they didn't, I'm sure they probably looked me up on Facebook and stuff, but I never actually said, what kind of work I did. But there were some women that would, and it became a pretty decent, like no one was, except for one woman was kind of, um I think there was Yeah, I guess you have to understand that, like, for instance, this woman, she had been in and out of the system. I remember someone saying that her family had rejected her, even like my own family, a number of times, and she just didn't seem like she would ever be one to ever leave the system. So I think there was a little bit of jealousy in that. And so she kind of gave me a hard time. But most of the other women were pretty kind. If they didn't want to be bothered with me, I don't want to be bothered with them. We kind of just left each other alone. About 3 weeks after I first got there, um, a young girl, I think she was only about 21, 22, came and took the fourth bed in our room. And her and I became fast friends. Now, of course, she was more than half my age. Um, Less, or I should say more than half, less than half my age, I think, saying that right. And, but there was something very spiritual about her. So we ended up having really long discussions. And from what I picked up from her is that she was also on this journey and had gone through many of the things that I had gone through. So she understood, like, um, a lot of things that I would say to her about spirituality. And she would just, like, I would sit there and talk to her, and she would just be so wide eyed and just like listen and be so captivated. And, you know, I really had started to have a fondness for her. And I think she, smart girl and everything, she, I think her mother had kind of said to her, was she was living home and kind of not contributing to the household. And her mother kind of said to her, like, you need to either contribute in some way or you need to find your own place. And what she said to me is that she kind of, I thought her mother kicked her out, but she said that she just ended up leaving. I think a few years before that, the mother had ended up homeless, and she had the children, and she ended up going into a shelter. So the young girl knew that that was a place she can go, and that's where she ended up. And I don't think that's probably not unreasonable, not unreasonable, but I'm a little at loss for words today. Sorry. Um, Not uncommon that people who are in the system or will follow kind of their parents' footsteps and never kind of move out of it. I remember saying to her that, she had a college education, she was smart, and that she would eventually move out of this situation just as I would, when a lot of these other women were not going to be able to do that, just because I always believe that there's certain, like, if a child is brought up a certain way in certain circumstances, and that's all they don't know anything outside of those parameters, they're going to stick within what they know, okay, until they're taken out of that situation and put into a different situation. So for a lot of these women, if that's the system they only know, they're going to stay in within that system, within those parameters. they don't know how to get themselves outside of that. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So it's sad to see even some of these women who left. And the main goal for you when you're in there is to be housed in your own place. There was one woman who I became very friendly with, and she had been a drug addict, you know. And when you're in there, you can't take any drugs. You're not supposed to take any drugs. And I remember she came to me one morning when I was sitting in the rec room, and she says, "I don't know, I'm at such a stage where I'm going to go over the edge and go back to my old habits. And I'm so afraid." And she was crying so profusely. And I didn't know how to help her because I had never really dealt with anyone who had a drug addiction. And all I could do was kind of just hug her and comfort her and tell her that she was strong enough to kind of push through this. And she says, "They're pushing me, and I'm going to, not be able to hold on to, I guess you call it sobriety, right? Even for drugs." So, but she did end up applying for housing, and she got an apartment. And like, I was really, really proud of her. This young girl also, just before I left, there's more I need to tell you in between, but just before I left, she ended up also being able to get housing in her own little apartment and leave there about 2 weeks before I ended up leaving. But I'll give you more on that story later on. Um, let's see. I also wanted to just say that I think we ignore the shelters. We think that when people are within shelters, that they're being taken care of fully, they're being provided for um, from the system. And there would be people who would stop by and donate food, which was always nice and special. There was companies, or say like a bakery, who had their leftover like food items, pastries or whatever left over for that day, and they would drop those off for us. And that was always like a big treat if for something like that, like bagels. What else? Oh, Chinese food. They would drop us pre-packaged Chinese food that they didn't sell like in the market or something like that. After, a certain time, date or something like that, they couldn't sell them anymore. So they would drop them off at us. So I'm just saying for you, if there is anything for you to donate, um, you know of someone who has a company, whatever it may be, please do so. Like, because you don't know how much these people really do appreciate those just small gestures. It came a time now moving into December, it's Christmas time, and people dropped off a lot of donations and gifts and really expensive, sometimes expensive things. And it was just such a nice thing to receive. The only problem with that is the directors had control over who got what. And there was some people, directors within, counselors, whatever you want to call them, within there who took some of that stuff home for themselves, who were stealing. And that was not a good situation. So as I was in there longer, I got to see that it wasn't all rainbows and puppies and fairy tales. place when I first landed and said, oh my God, I'm so thankful. But there was a lot of stuff going on that wasn't healthy. And um, I just know that I was able to get through that period of time, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about because I have a couple more things I want to say. But I do want to end this video so I'm not talking too much. Um, but like I say, make your donations more so when it's for a big amount of people instead of like dropping off like, or if you have like clothing donations is a big thing. Sheets and towels and blankets and pillows, things like that. But little gifts, things, even like someone he had dropped off like a bunch of like samples of like little lotions and shampoos and things like that. That was really nice too. But when you start buying like for Christmas, like that's a hard thing because you can't always trust the people who are working in there to make sure that the residents are getting the items. Okay, going to leave it there. I'll give you more on the experience in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to talk to me about your own experience, you can book time with me. There's a link below, and I will see you next time.